Hello again. Now, I've done a few videos already talking about how guitars are built and what the various bits on a guitar do and how they work. Well, what I want to talk about in this video is looking at the different types of guitar that you come across and explaining what makes one type of guitar distinct from other types of guitar. I'm going to start with this, which is a classical guitar. It's an acoustic guitar, and by that it means all of the sound comes from out of the body itself by the vibration of air. There's no electrics involved. It's purely sound moving around and being naturally amplified within this big wooden box. Now, the thing that makes a classical guitar distinct from the other types of guitar that we're going to see in this video is the strings. Strings on a classical guitar are made out of nylon, and that has its very distinctive sound. And if you looked at this guitar up close, you might think the bottom strings are made out of metal. The top three strings obviously are made out of nylon, you can see that. The bass strings look like they're made out of metal. What that actually is it is a nylon string, it's a nylon core, and then it's got like a very fine metal winding around it, just to give it a bit of extra weight without the string being like unmanageably thick. But the strings underneath are actually nylon. And the other key difference between a classical guitar and the other types of guitar that we're going to see is the profile and shape of the fingerboard. Now, the fingerboard on a classical guitar is a bit wider than you come across on other acoustic guitars or certainly on electric guitars. But the big difference is that the fingerboard profile on a classical guitar is flat. The same height right the ways across all the strings, whereas on like an electric guitar or a steel string acoustic guitar, the frets have actually got like an arch profile to them, so the fret wire is a little bit higher around the D and G strings in the middle. It's a bit lower on the E strings at the edge, so it's got like an arch to it. And the reason that the classical guitar is built the way that it is because the classical guitar discipline is a very distinctive right hand technique in the way that the fingers work, and the classical guitar's construction kind of is biased towards making that more playable by giving you a flat profile. A little bit harder on the left hand, but easier on the right hand, which is what the classical guitar is all about. It's a very distinctive right hand technique. But the basic principles of this guitar are, the same as we'll see on all the guitars we're going to come across. You set of strings, and as you play somewhere on the neck by pressing them down at a fret, you get higher notes or lower notes depending on where you are, and you form the notes. You can play single notes and chords and so on. Quite a lot of people start off on a classical guitar, I think because it's accessible. A lot of schools still have classical guitars. The nylon strings are a little easier on a beginner's fingers than say steel strings, so it's a little bit more accessible. And also you might come across things like 3/4 size classical guitars where everything's scaled down a little bit. So it's easier for a younger player to be able to get their fingers around rather than playing a full-size one where some of the stretches with the left hand might be a little bit difficult. Now, as the name suggests, classical guitars used in classical music, but you'll hear it used in other styles as well. Very common to hear like a nylon string classical guitar used in like Spanish music, for example. Often in like pop music, if somebody's wanting to put in like a Spanish sort of feel, you might hear a run being played on a classical guitar. This is often referred to as a Spanish guitar, I think, because of that Spanish sort of sound. Being really pedantic about it though, any guitar that's played this way, against your body, holding the neck like this, is a Spanish guitar, as distinct from something like what's called a Hawaiian guitar, where the guitar's played down on your lap and played in this sort of manner. That's called the Hawaiian guitar. Anything where you're playing it this way around is a Spanish guitar. Okay, so that's the classical guitar, all acoustic, nylon strings. Now let's look at another type of acoustic guitar, but this time with steel strings. So here we are with steel string acoustic guitar. Again, acoustic guitar, so no electrics involved. The sound's made by the air inside the body vibrating, being amplified naturally, and the sound coming out of this hole. The main difference between this and the classical guitar that we were looking at just before as I said, is it's got steel strings as opposed to the nylon strings on the classical, and the steel strings give it a more slightly harsher sort of sound. Also, the fingerboard on this, as I was saying, on a classical guitar it's flat. On a steel string guitar there's more of a curve to the fingerboard. It's quite subtle, it's not a particularly deep curve, but there is a curve there. And apart from that, the basic principles are the same. The strings are a little bit closer together, but the main difference for me between the classical and the steel string is the sound that we get from it. And this sort of guitar will, crop up variety of places. A lot of like folk music uses a steel string. Classical, crops up in rock music. All, I don't think there's any way you could say, oh, steel string acoustic guitar belongs to one particular genre. It's pretty diverse. Now, I was fibbing slightly when I said this is purely an acoustic guitar, because it's not. This is what's called an electro-acoustic. You'll see guitars that look like this, and they're acoustic guitars. But what acoustic guitar manufacturers can do is build in something clever into the bridge here, which allows you to pick up the sound of the strings, and taking one of these, plugging it in, you can hear the sound of the guitar coming out through a cable and into some electrics and an amplifier, which is great if you're wanting to play live or doing recording like this. So that's called an electro-acoustic. Basically an acoustic guitar. All the construction is what you would find on a normal acoustic guitar, but with the addition of some electrics. Now, these guitars come in various shapes and sizes, because acoustic guitars are very much, the voice comes from the way that the sound vibrates inside the body. The size of the body and the shape of the body, whether it's a bit fatter down here or a bit fatter down here, thinner in the waist, will affect if it's quite bottom oriented sound, or quite trebly, or quite bright, or whatever. So you'll go from everything from like small, it's like what we call a parlour size guitar, right the way up to huge, what's called a dreadnought guitar. This one's kind of in betweeny. This is what's called a concert size. It's it's comfortable. It's big. It's a bit bigger in body size than the classical that we looked at before, but it's not huge. If you've played like a big old like Martin dreadnought or something, they feel absolutely massive. This is a bit more manageable. So far we've seen the classical steel string acoustic talked about the electro-acoustic. Now let's move on to something completely electrified. Electric guitar. Now this guitar is markedly different to the other guitars we've looked at so far. In those acoustic guitars, sound's formed by air inside the body vibrating to give us the sound. In an electric guitar, the sound comes from these things, from the pickups. Pickups are magnets with wire wrapped around them thousands of times, and as the strings vibrate, and the strings on an electric guitar are always made out of steel, as the steel strings vibrate in the magnetic field, they induce an electric current, and that passes through the volume control and all the various bits of electrics in here, through an amplifier, and that gives you your sound. Now I've got another video on YouTube, which I'll put a link to down there, which talks about the different types of pickup, because there's quite a lot there, the way the pickups are made and how they influence the sound. But basically, the pickups give your guitar the sound. So plug this thing in, and we can hear it through an amplifier, or in this case it's plugged into a recording desk. And what you can do with an electric guitar, because you've got that electrical signal path, you can put effects into the chain. And of course the sound that you probably most associate with an electric guitar is something like this, where we're playing with some sort of distortion or overdrive to give it a much more rocky, a dirtier sound. Also, some electric guitars you will find have a tremolo bridge, or a whammy bar. allows us to do crazy things with the tension of the strings. So that's the solid body electric guitar. One more type of guitar to look at, so let's have a look at that now. Okay, one last type of guitar to look at, and that's this one. It's the semi-acoustic guitar. Now this is basically an electric guitar, solid body electric guitar. So in terms of construction, it's got a lot in common with the solid body that we've just looked at. But this one has some hollow areas within the body itself. So that gives it a slightly louder sound when it's not plugged in. It's nowhere near as loud as a normal acoustic guitar. The sound still predominantly comes from the pickups. But being semi-acoustic, it's a little bit lighter in terms of weight, and the fact that it's not solid wood, it's part wood and part chambers where air can vibrate, it gives it a different sound to what you would have if this was just purely a solid body. But in terms of sound, it's still very much like a solid body electric guitar. Don't confuse semi-acoustic with electro-acoustic. That acoustic guitar that we looked at before that had a pickup in is an electro-acoustic. Something like this, which looks like a solid body electric guitar but with some hollow bits in it, is semi-acoustic. Now, the different types of guitar that we've looked at, there's all sorts of different variations on them. You know, if you go to a guitar store, you find dozens of different types of solid body electric guitar, dozens of different variations on the acoustic guitars, the way they're built, and shapes and so on. So what I'm trying to show in this video is just the basic distinctions between them. And it's like the classical guitar you will find used in classical music, but you might find it also in some pop music when they want a Spanish sound, or it actually crops up now and again in the smoother end of jazz music. The solid body electric guitar, yeah, it's really got a place in heavy metal, but it's also in rock and roll, and it's here a lot of times in country. I don't think you can really pigeonhole any particular type of guitar for a particular type of music. But be aware that there are, say, these four different, if you like, four broad groups of types of guitar, each one with its own basic sort of quality that you can use as the foundation for the sound and how you use the instrument. Okay, so as I said, there's a link down there talking about pickups. I'll stick a couple of links in there because there are some other videos I've already done on YouTube talking about other aspects of guitar construction which you might find useful and kind of related to what I've just talked about here. Okay, so I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video sometime soon. Bye for now.